Good evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Amanda Vinicky. Paris Schutz has the evening off. We will be joined by our Week in Review guests in just a moment, but first, some of today's top stories. Violent crime is up in Chicago and in many other cities, but the Chicago Sun-Times reports that fewer criminals are being held responsible. The paper analyzed arrest data and reports the Chicago Police Department made arrests in 12% of crimes reported last year, a historic low since relevant information was first made publicly available in 2001. A young Chicago activist says it's cowardly that a Chicago police officer resigned before he could face discipline for punching her. Miracle Boyd was 18 2 summers ago when she was part of a large protest at the Columbus statue downtown. According to a Chicago Office of Police Accountability report released this week, then CPD officer Nicholas Jovanovich, used excessive force to knock a phone from Boyd's hand, causing her to lose a tooth. Copa also says he grossly mischaracterized what happened.
Jovanovich resigning means he can work on another force in another city and another state, and his actions against me not be displayed on his record. The cycle of police officers escaping accountability is almost inevitable to be.
Boyd says police shouldn't be able to file false reports, and this should be taken just as seriously as Jussie Smollett, the actor, filing a false report. A class action lawsuit is pending against Jovanovich and other officers that were allegedly taking aggressive actions during the July 2020 protests. This will be Alderman Harry Osterman's last term representing the 48th Ward. Osterman says he is not running for re-election and announced his plans today to give time for those who want a chance at the spot to get planning. Osterman has served as the alderman for Edgewater and Uptown since 2011 and previously was a state representative. His mom was also the area alderman in the 80s. Other retiring longtime council members include Carrie Austin and James Kappelman. Meanwhile, turnover at the Chicago Board of Education, the mayor's appointed 3 new members, including former alderman and ally Michael Scott Jr., who just last month resigned from the city council. More on our website. Starting tomorrow, anyone experiencing a mental health crisis can call a new 3-digit number, 988. It's similar to 911, but dialing or texting 988 will connect a caller with a trained crisis counselor. The rollout is nationwide, though calls placed in Illinois will be answered in state. Those with non-emergency emotional distress can seek treatment by visiting 988hotline.illinois.gov. Suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death for young adults aged 15 to 34 in Illinois. And now to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Shia Kapos of Politico, Sarah Schulte of ABC7 Chicago, Mike Lowe of WGN TV News, and Craig Delamore of WBBM News Radio. Starting with Highland Park, which will hold a gun violence prevention rally tomorrow. Now, that's following a candlelight vigil held this week in honor of the July 4th victims. Take a look at one of the younger Highland Park organizers told me about the parade massacre.
Unfortunately, I wasn't surprised. As a young person in America, we've become accustomed to this. In a sense, I've been training for this my entire life, learning how to run and hide and fight an active shooter. And that's not something kids should have to do when they're in school, learning history and English and math.
Mike, a lot of Highland Park residents certainly energized by the tragic events, wanting to make change out of what happened. Well, it'll be 2 weeks coming Monday. Not just here in Illinois, but some took their fight to Washington, D.C. You were there. What specifically are they asking for? Gun control is just such an open phrase.
Yeah, they are asking for one specific thing, and they want a federal ban on assault weapons. So this was a group of mothers, many of whom told me that they had no political affiliation, had never been part of any Republican or Democratic types of events before, but this is something that motivated them to get involved. And so within about 6 days, this group came together calling themselves March 4th, F-O-U-R-T-H, kind of a play on the July 4th date and the idea of marching forward to Washington, D.C. And on Tuesday, they were able to secure meetings with both U.S. senators from Illinois, Tammy Duckworth and Dick Durbin. They also met with Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut and a number of other representatives in Congress to take their concerns, tell their stories, and ensure that someone in Washington is listening. Then on the next day, on Wednesday, they held a rally outside on the Capitol grounds, at which time we heard not only from Highland Park survivors, but also a number of parents who lost their children in the Uvalde, Texas massacre. It was a very powerful event, hearing directly from these victims, but the question remains whether or not there is any political will to do this. Nancy Pelosi has said that the Democratic caucus would support a federal ban on assault weapons in the House, but there are not 10 Republican senators who appear willing to even entertain the measure at this point.
Meanwhile, we have some communities that are not therefore, because of the partisanship that you talked about, waiting for Washington to act. So places like Naperville that is considering a ban on commercial sales of high-capacity magazines, on semi-automatic rifles. So, Sarah, Highland Park, though, has an assault weapons ban, and we saw what horribly unfolded there. Does a peaceful approach make a difference?
Probably not. I mean, Highland Park passed one in 2013, and a lot of individual communities have passed them. But as Mayor Rodering, Nancy Rodering, the mayor of Highland Park, said earlier this week, you know, it has to be national. I mean, you can't have each individual city or town, have these. You have to have. It has to become national, which, as Mike just pointed out, in the Senate, this is a dead end issue.
But Shia, what about state action? Something we keep coming back to as we hear, for example, Governor J.B. Pritzker calling for a federal ban on assault-style weapons. But Illinois does not have one, despite Democrats holding supermajorities. This wasn't really a top priority for the Pritzker administration in this past session or really previously in the term. So why not? Why is this something that Illinois has not done, Shia?
Well, right now, I think it's because it's an election year, and you have Republicans who aren't interested in this because they're Second Amendment advocates, and they worry that their Second Amendment rights will be taken away. And so Democrats are treading lightly because of that. The other reason I think that they just have to have a bigger conversation, because they know no matter what they do in Illinois, you can still jump over to Indiana and buy a gun and bring it over. That's the problem that Chicago has seen. Chicago has tried to control guns, tried to keep guns out, but if you can just jump right over the border and bring guns in, it means nothing for what you have in the state. So that's why there's this national call. What you will see in the state legislature, I think, when they do come back in the fall, if they don't do an early session or a special session, is to tie up communication between different between like the state police and local entities, because the suspect in the case in Highland Park bought that legally, but there were some red flags that maybe he shouldn't have been able to, but that wasn't, but the state folks weren't aware of that when he bought the gun. So there needs to be some better communication. I think that's what the kind of thing that we'll see in legislation coming up.
And gun control, of course, getting a lot of attention, activity, Shia, as you noted. Certainly there are many who believe that this is not, in fact, the answer and points to mental health or also disinvestment from communities. So, Craig, I'm going to toss to you. We heard at the top of the show that the Sun-Times crunched numbers and that while crime is up, arrests are at historic lows and are down. To what do you, and really more pointedly, the police attribute that?
I think in some cases what they are saying is that the things that they are doing to control crime, some of it is having some effect. And in fact, you just from the complaints that you're hearing from the Chicago Police Union, they are working the police longer. There are more of them out on the street. So there's that. But also, some of them say, well, they're not policing as aggressively as they might have before. But on the other hand...
Purposely so, Craig? Or is that happenstance of other events? Or
I think some of it is the new rules that are going into place, saying, for example, chases are allowed in fewer cases now. Things like that are having an effect. But on the other hand, remember that except for what's happening downtown, year over year, the number of gun crimes have, in fact, gone down, except in downtown where they are up. And that's probably because these kinds of shootings weren't happening downtown before.
Well, and they're up by a lot. I mean, it's not just they're up by 5%. I forgot what the percentage is. I know Alderman Brian Hopkins, who represents that ward, I mean, talks about it all the time. But it's a huge percentage of what the crime is up in downtown.
Plus, you have fewer police officers than you did, 3 or 5 years ago. Hundreds of fewer police officers, partly because of COVID, because they couldn't have police training. You couldn't get recruits into the system. And because there's some morale problem. People are retiring and then they're not filling these positions. So there are fewer officers too. I have to wonder if that has a lot to do with it.
Yes, so much goes into it. The consent decree, recruiting, COVID, an emphasis perhaps on not making low-level arrests for things like marijuana. There's so much that goes into it. It was something that we will continue to follow. But hopefully a gorgeous weekend here with, mercifully, no tragedies along those lines. Governor J.B. Pritzker not going to be here for it, however, because he will be the keynote speaker for a Florida Democrats annual meeting. You also have the governor having attended a National Governors Association meeting, and reports out of Portland, Maine are that he did not rule out a run for president in 2024. So, Shia, we have the governor's Republican opponent for this year's election, Darren Bailey, saying that Pritzker is out of touch, that he's too busy hobnobbing and should be paying attention to Illinois. Is all of this talk of a national bid for office hurting Pritzker at home at all, or helping, Shia?
We are a pretty blue state. So right now, I don't think it's hurting. I think, as we get more into the election season, maybe after Labor Day, you might not see him traveling around the country quite as much. That trip to Florida set off a lot of red flags for people because we thought, wow, he really is ramping up. But I understand from his staff that he got that invitation from the Florida Democratic Party back in April, and it was just on the books for a long time. The New Hampshire speech that he gave, that was really interesting, a really good speech that really introduced himself to Democrats there, which is what presidents often do, or people wanting to run for president. So that also raised red flags. I don't see Governor Pritzker doing anything to challenge President Biden outright, unless he has some.
He said that he'll support. He said that he'll support President Biden in 2024.
Right.
Parties do these sort of things.
I mean, but Governor Pritzker was very, very strong in that speech that he gave on July 4th in Highland Park, and it almost seemed a little bit like that was directed towards the Biden administration, that they may not be doing enough. I mean, there seemed to be a little bit of some
messaging there. Well, yeah, and you both have parties that do this consistently, bring in elected officials from other states. Illinois does that, for example, during the state fair. But by the way, I remember reporting one of them was Pete Buttigieg. Lo and behold, WBC, a presidential run.
And you remember Joe Biden was supposed to speak instead, but he got sick. That's why they brought in Pete Buttigieg that year.
Thank you. Good jogging of the memory. Yes, it all comes full circle.
Amanda, it's also been pointed out in the Washington Post and other national media that both Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, and J.B. Pritzker have captured the tone that the kind of rank and file Democrats want, something a little bit more combative than the conciliatory tone, the gestures of bipartisanship that you see from the Biden administration. Democrats seem to be yearning for somebody a little bit more combative, stronger on the messaging, as has been said. And J.B. Pritzker seems to be filling that void that the Democratic Party seems to have right now.
And certainly, you wonder sometimes how much we, the media, fuel into part of this speculation, right? Now, while we're looking at coming elections, potential dirty laundry was set to have been aired this fall when the 4 defendants connected to Commonwealth Edison for allegedly striving to bribe former House Speaker Michael Madigan were set to go to trial. But instead, Craig, that has been delayed until March. By the way, that is after the November general election. So why the change, and should Democrats in Illinois be breathing a sigh of relief over it?
I don't know if anyone should be breathing a sigh of relief, but some of the change is kind of expected. First off, the U.S. Attorney's Office does not like to get in the way of general elections. They sometimes do, sometimes just to tweak people, but they like to stay out of the way. But some of this has to do with how many big trials they can have going on at the same time. And what we are going to have is R. Kelly back in town. He is back in town now. So that's part of what's going on. But these are also, remember, these are people who, at least Commonwealth Edison, pretty much has already pleaded guilty to, in a deferred prosecution. So the fact that they haven't been prosecuted yet had a little bit to do with the fact that they were cooperating. They are the ones who outlined this scheme that Mike Madigan is now charged with. So I don't think...
The utility laid it bare. These folks have all pleaded not guilty and are very much fighting the charges. But we've learned so much of that dirty laundry already. Now, if you think that case is stretched out, though, what about Alderman Ed Burke? So, Sarah, his racketeering trial is now set for next November. That'll make it nearly 4.5 years after he was first indicted. So, importantly, by the way, that means that the racketeering trial will be after the February 2023 elections. Sarah, is he going to run again?
I think he probably will. I mean, I don't know. Craig could probably weigh in more than look, he was reelected. I mean,
after these charges came out, yeah, he won.
After these charges came out, so what's going to prevent him from not running again? Now, maybe he's seen some of his colleagues that have been around for a while starting to, calling it quits. But I don't think that affects Ed Burke at all. I mean, I think this is the only thing he's got right now is that seat, and I think he's going to hang on. But I'm sure Craig can answer that better than I can.
Well, Craig, go ahead. And also, can I ask, does it hurt the ward at all that he is under this cloud while still serving on the city council?
Obviously, the people who are against him in the ward would say that, but he is still delivering for the ward. Nobody is keeping his ward from getting anything. And today, at one of the city council committee meetings, he was probably more vocal than I've seen him in maybe months, pushing for recognition of one of the Iwo Jima soldiers who was from this area, a Native American, and basically had a really tough life at the end. And he was basically calling for more recognition for him, and the measure was approved unanimously. So he still can really bring the tug the heartstrings when he wants to. And I think he might run again. But on the other hand, he's got time to figure that out and decide if it's time to finally pack it in.
Plus, his ward has been redrawn a little bit. It's not his old ward. It's a new ward because of redistricting that happened after the census. So that may mean he doesn't have the support that he thought he had, or that he did have the past 10 years. That may be what really decides whether he stays or not.
A different voter base and not perhaps wanting to look at a loss. Now, another powerful figure that is going to be up for re-election at that time. It was, of course, Mayor Lori Lightfoot, who we haven't heard from much this week, at least in Chicago, and that is because she's been on a sort of foreign trade mission in London and in Paris. So I'm sorry that none of us are there to cover it, but
I tried to get my editor to send me.
Sorry about that, Shia. So let's keep it with you then. She's making an argument that what does she have to tell about Chicago in places like London and Paris? And is it a message you think that is going to result in any change in effect for Chicagoans?
Well, it's a two-pronged message. One, she's talking to corporate types. I know she was at a tech conference about why Chicago is a good place to bring your business, to bring contract. I don't know what you bring when you're in Paris to Chicago, but it's a good place to do business because of the young residents who are here, because of the tech savvy people who live here. And so that is one message. The other message is that it's a great place to visit. And she's really been ramping up the tourism aspect. The thinking is, I think I just saw something that Chicago could return to its pre-pandemic tourism numbers, in 2 years, which would be, a savior for the city. That's what keeps the city running, because without those summer tourism dollars, we all know what winter is like.
Tax, sales tax, all of it. You need something.
Right. Yeah. Have you been to Navy Pier lately? Yeah. It's shoulder to shoulder. People are back. Maybe not in the same numbers, but they are back.
Right. Well, the interesting thing is, I was just downtown today, and there are way more tourists downtown on a summer day than there are actually employees.
Perhaps here for pitchfork and such, but but that's a different sort of equation, right? What it means for the downtown restaurants that rely on a weekday lunch crowd. So much to focus here. So, and that of course is a lot because of COVID. So, Mike, Cook County back at a high level of transmission, as are 49 of Illinois' 102 other counties. I believe only 8 are at a low risk of transmission. So what is different about this BA.5 variant, and what do we need to know about it?
The BA.5 variant is said to be much more pervasive and easier to catch, essentially. And I know personally a number of people who have COVID at the moment. Of course, it's not the same as pre-vaccination. Most people I know who have gotten it recently have had relatively mild symptoms if they're vaccinated. Nonetheless, the Biden administration is warning people that we are not out of the pandemic, that you should keep your guard up. If you feel like you need to wear your mask, they're saying, put your mask on in those shoulder-to-shoulder places. And they're also talking about boosters again. And that might be something that happens for the wider public within the next couple of months as they kind of adjust the formula for the
an Omicron variant versus these ancestral, I guess, COVID is what the original version's called.
The biggest concern among from healthcare professionals with all the new variant is the fact that it kind of sidesteps the previous Omicron variants. So they're really concerned about people getting reinfected.
So, Sarah, if that is the case, we had the governor this week just voiding vaccine requirements for Illinois universities, and then also easing the testing that is required for unvaccinated workers at nursing homes. We don't have any mask mandates. If this is such a surge, concern, immunity problems, is it time to bring back mandates? Is this politics? What's going on?
No, I mean, Governor Pritzker's move is all about politics. It's an election year. I mean, the Democrats, they decided months ago they do not want to be defined as the party of mandates and shutdowns. So that ship has sailed. I think that's his motivation. I also think it's probably what the people want. I mean, I don't think people want to be, that they can take their own individual precautions, but I don't think people want government telling them what to do anymore. I mean, at least I think that's probably what polling shows. But with that said, I think government does have to have some type of responsibility, which is probably why the White House is urging people not to wait for this Omicron-specific vaccine to come out in the fall and to go ahead and get the 3rd or 4th shot this summer to at least protect yourself this summer.
I think you're seeing a lot more people still wearing masks. Mm-hmm. And as the news goes, you actually see the masks increase. City Hall, almost no one gets on an elevator at City Hall without putting their masks on. So people are falling into kind of a routine where when they're in close contact with other people, they keep the masks on.
When it's a big office,
they don't.
Yeah. Craig, we've got less than a minute left, but I really quickly wanted to get to you. While the City Council did advance an ethics ordinance, it does a lot of things, or City Council committee, that is. What is the big takeaway of this ethics ordinance that you think could make a difference?
I think the big takeaway is that they are cracking down a little bit more, tightening up is better, on things like nepotism and people benefiting their families. So those rules are a lot tighter, disclosure's a lot tighter, and no longer will you see former members of the city council on the floor lobbying their ex-colleagues. That is now formally verboten.
At least will be if the city council passes that and follows the committee's action, right?
Yeah, yes, but it was a unanimous vote after the years of fighting over this. It was a unanimous voting committee today.
All right.
Maybe that's why everyone's quitting.
Yeah.
There you go, Sarah. That's where we're going to leave it on that note because we are out of time. Thanks so much to Shia Kapos, Sarah Schulte, Mike Lowe, and Craig Dellamore. And that is our show for this Friday night. Be sure to join us tomorrow night at 6 for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. Then immediately after that, Chicago Tonight Black Voices at 6:30. We are back at 7 o'clock next week. Now, for the Week in Review, I'm Amanda Vinicky. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, especially with that BA5 out there. Good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm, and proud sponsor of programming that offers advice and strategies to enhance the physical and mental well-being of fellow legal practitioners in Illinois.